Chapter 14. How did you enjoy the ambassador's ball? Rose gasped as she heard the low voice near her ear. The shiver that slid its way down her spine was not unpleasant, although she was undecided how exactly she felt about it. "Alexander Edward Philip Milton Wrentham, you fairly scared a year off my life," she declared heatedly, covering her confusion with playful anger. "You really need to learn to pay more attention to your surroundings, my dear lady. I noticed last night that you seem to be playing matchmaker with Lady Anne. Have you lost all your senses? Sir Broderick took note and did not look at all pleased. You were supposed to be making every effort not to draw attention to what we were up to." Alex hadn't meant to rile her up, but when he saw her, it seemed he couldn't help himself. Rose could feel the heat rising into her cheeks, and her temper rose with it. "I was not drawing undue attention to myself, Your Grace," she insisted with emphasis, as she stuck her chin at a stubborn angle. "Then why, in heaven's name, would you be visibly thwarting Broderick's plans by trying to set her up with other eligible parti?" Rose felt goosebumps break out on her skin as she sensed the Duke's conflicted feelings toward her. She focused on his anger as he ground his teeth in frustration. "Think on it, Your Grace," Rose demanded with impatience. "Why would Broderick think anything of my actions? He has no way of knowing what I ever had. Do not all the young debutantes share their giggles about the eligible lords and gentlemen wending their way through the salons of the temps during the season? Why would anyone remark upon my introducing Lady Anne to anyone?" "Mayhap no one else would, you impertinent little chit, but Broderick did. I saw him watching you with his eely eyes. You are the one who told me you have a history with him. He may not be as ignorant of that history as you had thought. He seemed quite aware of the fact that you were trying to match Lady Anne up with that Viscount, Lord Edgecombe, and as despicable as I think he is, I would never accuse him of being daft. He might be fully aware of your reasons for doing so." Now Rose laughed, although it was not a sound filled with mirth. "Sir Jason Broderick would never understand my reasons for trying to help Lord Anthony and Lady Anne see that they would make a perfectly lovely couple." "What are you talking about? He will no doubt consider it an attempt to foul up his plans." Rose shrugged as nonchalantly as possible, which clearly irritated the Duke. He growled low in his throat at her display of disregard. "Your Grace, do you also think that is why I was doing it?" she asked in a low voice. Alex's eyes grew wary at her tone. "Is that not what you were about?" "Not at all," she insisted swiftly. "We have every intention of fouling up his plans, as you said, by other means. But I feel badly about it because Lady Anne is a sweet young woman who deserves better than her father intends for her. I am sure he means well, thinking he is killing two birds with one stone, as it were, but since I cannot allow her to marry you, I felt duty-bound to ensure she finds someone suitable in your place." As they were arguing, Alex and Rose had come toe-to-toe and were glaring at one another fiercely. Rose could feel her chest rising and falling furiously, and cared not a fig about the flags of colour flying high in her cheeks. She could hardly believe the Duke was being so daft. She would never have thought it. Rose's passionate defence of her choices must have affected Alex. She could see his gaze darkening as his focus strayed from her eyes to her lips. Rose felt the most profound desire to lick them as her mouth suddenly dried with nerves. She felt frozen in place, her heart racing with the maelstrom of emotion as she watched his unsteady hand reach toward her. Searching his gaze, she could see that Alex was unconvinced of the wisdom of his next action, but he was doing it anyway. It was startling how heat curled in her belly in concert with his warm hand curling around her nape, as the Duke pulled her face toward his own. The few chaste kisses Rose had previously experienced had done nothing to prepare her for this moment. The warm brush of his breath just before their lips touched was but a prelude to the multitude of sensations that inundated her senses as their lips met and held. A warning sound was clanging at the back of her mind that this was a terribly bad idea, but for this moment Rose was determined to indulge in the sensations coursing through her. All her senses were heightened, and they were all sending an overload of messages. She could hear his intake of breath, sharp in the hushed silence of the great room. He smelled of the shaving soap he had so recently used, and tasted delicious as his lips expertly parted hers, and his tongue teased at the entrance of her mouth. She would never have thought tasting someone else would be a nice experience, but in that moment it crossed her mind that she would happily do this all day. She wasn't quite sure what to do with her hands, but she was terribly glad she had not worn gloves, as she reached up and ran her fingers through his silky hair, glorying in the springy thickness. Her other hand found its way to his cheek, and she caressed him mindlessly. The eyes she had closed briefly in the moment opened slowly to better take in the sight of him, and they connected yearningly with his intense stare. Seeing the familiar sea-green shade brought a shaft of clarity to her befuddled mind. I am standing in Barlington House for all the world to see, kissing the Duke of Wrentham, of all people. Horror dawning, Rose pulled herself wrenchingly away from Alex. Without conscious thought, her hand pulled back and cracked loudly against his clean-shaven cheek, while her other hand slapped over her own open mouth. The momentary inertia that had seized her finally released its grasp on Rose, much to her relief. She could feel the heat ebbing and flowing from her cheeks as they flooded with colour, and then paled as she thought of all the ramifications of their interlude. Once again, her eyes darted around to make sure no one was watching them or had seen what had transpired. Relief flooded her as she realized they were alone. "Whatever were you thinking, Your Grace?" she demanded. "I was thinking that you looked delectably adorable in your righteous indignation," Alex explained with a drawl, biting back his grin as her ire rose as if on cue. "You are truly as despicable as my parents have been saying the Wrenthams are. I did not want to believe it, but you have just proven that it is true." She barely recognized the soft, breathy voice that was issuing from her lips, and cringed at the lack of certainty and the utter disappointment she could hear. Alex could hear the crack of her hand still ringing in his ears, and he was fleetingly surprised at the sting her little hand had managed to produce. The sensual haze he had momentarily been in quickly dissipated as he took in the horror and terror etched on Rose's beautiful face. It was highly inappropriate, but he felt like smiling, seeing her rosebud mouth scrunched up into such a look of bitter distaste. It did not sit right on her usually open, smiling face. Alex refused to be cowed by this slip of a girl. He was a duke, for heaven's sake, but it required a great deal of effort. Straightening himself to his fullest height and gathering all his dignity around him, he looked down his nose at her, keeping a tight rein on his own temper and trying to keep in mind that she was no doubt labouring under a plethora of emotions. He hoped he would not say something he could not take back, because clearly thinking before she spoke was not of much concern to his Rosie. "Pull yourself together, Rosamond," he bade her in as authoritative a tone as he could muster. "I have not accosted you in any truly dastardly way, as you are clearly thinking at this moment. Not as a miss here. I thought a girl with your experience would comprehend and be able to handle the heightened senses that a situation such as this can cause." Feeling like a toad as he saw the myriad of emotions that crossed her expressive face, Alex hated himself for playing upon the worries he was well aware concerned her. He could not help the awe he felt as he saw her pull her dignity and composure around herself like a cloak. Rose's pride stiffened her spine, and she was able to look Alex in the eye as she coolly began speaking, obviously deciding to just ignore the entire personal situation and merely address the whole reason they had met up in the first place. "Thank you for meeting up with me, Your Grace. I had a very enlightening conversation with Lady Yorkley about Sir Broderick yesterday, and it became more obvious why he would be so intent upon controlling you. He is out to control the government. You are high enough in the House of Lords for his needs. According to Lady Yorkley, Sir Broderick has had his sights set upon the Prince for quite some time." "Prinny?" Alex asked, incredulous. "Whatever for?" "While, if I understand correctly, although his authority has been drastically curtailed, he is still the regent of our country and will one day be king. He may not have as much power as his father or grandfather once did, but he is still the monarch. As such, he has the most authority in all the land." If you believe that, you are far more naive than I ever thought, Alex scoffed. Rose could feel her eyebrows spring into a hairline, and her jaw unhinged inelegantly. Now you are just being ridiculous, Your Grace, she huffed. No, I am not, my dear, Alex explained rather condescendingly, much to Rose's disgust. His snide smile made her palm itch to slap his face again, but she managed to keep it firmly at her side. Alex saw her clench her hands and had to exert an effort over his features to keep a grin from breaking over his face. The lovely young woman is so easy to goad if you know her well enough. He could see that the situation between the Smythes and Renthams was going to have to be straightened out as soon as possible, because there was no way he was going to be able to stand by and watch this treasure be married off to someone else. He would learn to live with her managing ways. He now knew the quiet girl he had envisioned as his wife would bore him to tears, and while he missed his brother, the circumstances of his death did not need to dictate Alex's own future. Chastising himself that such thoughts were not at all helpful at the moment, he shoved the idea from his mind for the time being, and returned to the subject at hand. Realizing it would not do to have her stomp off in a huff, as they still needed to work together amicably to clear up the Broderick situation, Alex tried for a placating tone. You are, of course, correct in stating that the Prince Regent holds the highest office of authority, Alex began, placing slight emphasis on the word office. But, as you also said, much of his power has been curtailed. The man who wields the most authority is actually the Prime Minister. Alex could see Rose's eyes widening in surprise as he began his explanation, and had to bite back his amusement. It was clear that he had been paying attention to his lessons in school, and had been working hard on the government over the past few years. He had never had interests like this when they had been friends. She finally waved him to silence. With a sweet, conciliatory smile upon her lips, she offered an apology. Your Grace, I am sorry for calling you ridiculous. Clearly you know much more than you ever let on. But please recall that I am fairly well educated in these matters as well. We are wasting our precious time by standing here debating the politics of the situation. It matters not. The fact is, your very speech reveals even more why Broderick would be wanting to control you. As the Duke of Rentham, you are by birth highly placed in our government's affairs, and by the words you just spoke, you displayed a degree of knowledge and involvement that make you dangerous to anyone not on the same side as you. Alex blinked at her in surprise. Rose's lips twitched with her amusement, and she was clearly taken aback to see his answering grin. How can you find this funny? She asked with confusion. Another perspective is always so helpful, he explained rather vaguely. Now it was his turn to wait for silence, as he could see that Rose was about to launch into speech. You were absolutely right. We must not waste any time. We really need to ensure that we are not seen together. I fear that Broderick may have taken notice of you, and I do not want you in harm's way. It would be most helpful if we could ascertain what exactly he is after. Do you think he wants to be Prime Minister or some such position? Or is he after something more specific? Men that seek power are so often after both more power and something specific, Rose answered pensively. In Broderick's case, I have never taken the time to try to figure out the workings of his mind. But in Vienna, he was involved in fouling up the land divisions. I am uncertain how that benefits him, but you can be sure it does somehow, whether someone was paying him handsomely or if the land in question was his. Now there are to be more negotiations taking place in Paris shortly. My father is about to depart. Your father is leaving town? Alex repeated in surprise. But that shall leave you without protection. Rose blinked at the Duke with surprise, clearly unsure how to respond to his remark. I do not know whether I should remind you that I do not require protection, or to explain that my father's absence will not leave me unprotected, she said with a small laugh. She then looked around at where they were, and Alex could see she was remembering what had transpired between them. A tide of warm colour rose in her cheeks. Well, maybe I do need protection, she conceded with another small laugh. But my father's presence or absence will not make much difference in that regard. Seeing the arguments written on Alex's face, she continued, placating. My brother is to arrive in town on the morrow, so I shall still have a male family member about, have no fear. Remembering her brother as a tow-headed little boy did not reassure the Duke as to his friend's safety. "Your brother is a boy, Rosamond. What good will he be?" "Time does march on, Your Grace. He is just about to turn 19. He has finished his schooling, and he has even been on the Grand Tour for some time. It is hard to imagine, but he is practically a man." They shared an amused smile before Rose continued. "Once again, we are strayed from our topic. I do declare, Your Grace, we are rather useless at this. It would seem we could fritter the day away mumbling nonsense at each other, and we shall have nothing accomplished. I must be leaving shortly, or my absence will be remarked upon. Do tell me if you can think of anything we ought to be doing." Alex grinned at his companion, and then wrinkled his brow. "You are right. It does seem like we could easily spend the day together." Rose grew flustered. "That is not what I was trying to say, Your Grace," she insisted with discomfort. I know," Alex soothed. "I was merely funning you. Now, do you have any ideas? Do you think it might be best to put a bug in your father's ear at this point? It would seem that neither of us is fully equipped to thwart the knight in whatever nefarious plot he might have. If it does have something to do with the treaties being negotiated in Paris, since neither you nor I are going, there is nothing we can do to stop him." Rose chewed her lip as she thought on his words, oblivious to the intent expression descending upon the Duke's face as he watched her, licking his own lips hungrily. He tried to wipe all expression from his face as her attention returned to him. "Are you quite all right, Your Grace?" she asked solicitously. "You look a trifle unwell." "I am perfectly fine, thank you for asking," he declared with aplomb. "What have you decided?" "I think you are quite correct. We do need my father involved now. There is no avoiding it. But this might be the last time we can talk." Alex found the earnest look she cast his way to be utterly endearing, and felt his heart swell with emotion that he made every effort to keep within bounds as she continued. "It is quite possible that I shall be banished to our estate if I cannot find the perfectly correct words to convey the seriousness of the matter to my father. Even if I do find the right words, if I have to tell him of our involvement, that will most likely still be the outcome. Or, mayhap, he will take me with him to Paris, although he no doubt is fully aware that would be a reward, not a punishment," she mused with a grin. When Alex made protest, she waved away his concerns. "Do not trouble yourself, Your Grace. I cannot say that I am truly attached to this season business. It does not suit my disposition to be placed on the market for matrimonial bidding. As you yourself have remarked, I am not the biddable sort of girl most noblemen want to take as their wife, and I so wish to be useful. I will be perfectly happy to go back to the country, or better yet, to head off to Paris with my father. I am not averse to the idea of marriage. It is just that the silliness of catching a husband drives me mad. Perhaps my father will marry me off to the nearest statesman, and that will suit us all perfectly well." Alex could see that her wobbling smile did not quite reach her eyes, but there was nothing he could do as she bolstered her spirits and ploughed on bravely. "I am not telling you this to make you feel sorry for me, Your Grace. I am just wanting to warn you that you might be on your own to deal with Broderick if I do get banished. And in the event that his schemes do not involve Paris, you shall have to be vigilant to thwart him. I know you do not enjoy these sorts of shenanigans, so you must be sure to enlist whatever help you might need. If I am well away from the situation, you need not fear for my reputation, so it is not as necessary to keep matters secret." "You look so tragic right at this moment, Rosie. I cannot believe that you are as unmoved by the thought of banishment as you say." Alex's concern caused the tear she was valiantly trying to suppress to spill over and slide slowly down her cheek. "I truly would not mind going back to the country," she explained as she brushed the offending moisture impatiently away. "I just wish I could be around to finish this thing. I'm the one who uncovered the problem. I would dearly love to be around to see its resolution." "Well, then, do not borrow trouble, my dear," Alex declared with confidence. "I do believe you are a sufficiently resourceful girl that you will be able to tell Lord Smythe about this without getting yourself banished. Have you thought about what you will say? Think it through, and if you would like, you could even practice on me. I could play the role of your father." If it had been the Duke's intention to make Rosie's mood lighten, He did exactly the right thing, as she burst into a fit of giggles that was difficult for her to control. "Oh, Alex, you are a complete hand," she declared after she managed to get her mirth within bounds. "I do not think I could remain serious if you were to try to pretend to be my father, but I do appreciate your suggestion. And you are absolutely correct. If I think on it enough, I should be able to muddle my way through. My main concern, even more than the fear of banishment, is to ensure that my father takes this threat seriously and does not merely dismiss it because of your involvement. It might be best if I leave you out completely. This would ensure I get to stay in London to keep an eye on the scoundrel, if he does not head to Paris, and would also keep my father focused on the problem. If I can skip over certain details without Papa noticing, I just might be able to pull it off." She concluded this statement with a cheeky grin. Alex returned her grin cheerfully. "You were always good at pulling the wool over everyone's eyes when you were a slip of a girl. I am perfectly sure that you were even better at it now than you ever were. If anyone can get Lord Smythe to miss a detail or two, it is you." "But your statement reminds me that my father scarcely ever misses a detail, so I shall have to be alert and diligent." She paused for a moment, deep in thought. "All right, Your Grace, I really must go. This is the best course of action we can take at this point. I will do my utmost to get a message to you as to my father's reaction, whatever the outcome. If he has anything helpful to share, I will endeavour to pass it on to you as discreetly as possible, even if I have to leave town." On an impulse, she grabbed for Alex's hand. "Promise me you will be careful, Alex. Broderick can be a very dangerous man. Do not do anything foolish, and enlist whatever help you might need." He must have felt the slight tremble in her hand, despite her brave words, because Alex squeezed her hand between both of his. "I promise you, little one, I will take care of myself and keep that upstart from causing any trouble for our beloved country. Now you promise me that you will take care of yourself. I know your parents love you and would never harm you, but they are not completely rational when it comes to the subject of the Wrenthams. You have repeatedly expressed concern over my hatred of double dealings, but in this case I absolve you of any need for guilt. Lie if you must. I would dearly love to have you remain my partner in this particular endeavour." Rose pulled back in surprise, gratified by his concern, but chagrined over his words. "Your Grace, I could never lie outright to my papa. I would like to avoid mentioning any explanation of our particular involvement, but if I cannot avoid it, I will not lie about it. That is where I draw the line in my life of spying." She could not quite decipher the flicker of emotions that crossed Alex's face, but Rose felt another wave of goosebumps rise on her flesh, as she thought he was about to kiss her again. She took a step back from him. He allowed her to pull her hand from his grasp, and the moment passed. Alex summed up their conversation. "Very well, Miss Rose. I will trust your judgment and await word from you. I promise to remain vigilant regardless of what transpires between you and your father. And I will wish you luck," he finalized with another wide grin. Rose appreciated his lightening of the mood. She was glad their interlude was about to conclude. His presence had been unsettling to her the last few times they encountered one another, but this time, with that kiss at the beginning, it was nearly more than she could handle. She was grateful they had managed to have a coherent conversation, despite the swirling emotions she was experiencing. But she was also glad their time together was coming to an end. It would not do for her to fall in love with the Duke of Wrentham, she scolded herself for what felt like the millionth time, as she hurriedly took her leave of him and gathered her things. Without a backward glance, she strode to the open doorway, but before exiting the room she could not resist turning back for one last look at the handsome nobleman. With an upraised hand, she waved goodbye and forced her reluctant feet to bear her away. Alex was left staring at the empty doorway, his arms still elevated in the small wave they had exchanged. With rueful regret, he took a deep breath and turned away. Looking about, he decided to leave by another way. His usually alert senses were somewhat preoccupied with thoughts of Miss Smythe. He wondered if they would ever again be able to share such easy camaraderie. With renewed determination, he reminded himself that he was a duke, and he would have to make it possible. All of a sudden, though, his dulled wits sharpened as he realized someone was watching him. From the quick glance he got before that someone got up and tried to hurry away, it looked as though they might have become comfortable watching him for a while. That meant that he had been watching them. That is when Alex's blood ran quite cold, and his previously dulled wits truly came into focus. Endeavouring to appear nonchalant, he turned his head in the direction he was walking, toward the back entrance of Burlington House, while keeping an eye on the character out of the corner of his eye. "Who are you?" he asked inside his mind. "And are you watching me on the orders of Sir Broderick? And if so, how am I to ever get word to Rose?" was his last anguished thought as he hurried toward his waiting carriage. Glad to see his tiger on the ground on the far side of his team, the Duke hastened to join him, forestalling the young man's leap onto the back of the conveyance. "Pete, come here. I have another assignment for you today." With a quick glance over his shoulder, he could see that the observer was still in sight and had, in fact, paused to see if the Duke was still watching him. Hidden as he was behind the horses, Alex did not think the other man could see him. "Do you see that squirrely-looking man by the last pillar? The buck with the brown coat, whose hat looks like someone stumped on it?" Pete asked eagerly. "The very one. I want you to follow him as discreetly as possible, and then let me know what you find out." Alex paused to regard his young servant seriously. "I must warn you, this could be dangerous. I will not turn you off if you refuse." "Get on with you, your grace. I can look after myself, and danger ain't nothing but excitement with a different name." Alex grinned at the young man's words. "Very well, then. Do not let him notice you, and you absolutely must not be caught. Run away if you are in the least bit of danger. Whatever you might find out is more useful to me than a dead tiger." "Discreet is my other name," Pete responded with quiet dignity as he peered out from between the horse's legs. "I'll have all the info you could want, and more, before the end of the night, your grace. Don't you trouble your mind none about me." With those words, the young man scampered quickly away from the carriage and took up an advantageous position close to the large building. Alex made a show of checking his horse's harnesses, and then climbed up into the vehicle in order to make an explanation for his disappearance from view, hoping the scoundrel watching him would not realize he had been set upon. With a mental shrug, despite his myriad of misgivings, Alex drove away, leaving his tiger to gather as much intelligence as he could. Hoping he was wrong, Alex feared that his Rosie was now in much more danger than he ever would have thought, and the Duke racked his brain for any ideas on how to mitigate the danger. As soon as he arrived at his large house in Mayfair, Alex summoned several footmen to his study as he contemplated how Miss Smythe would react were she to realize just how capable of duplicity he had become. He had found it quaint to realize how innocent she truly was, despite her protestations otherwise, and could not bear to disabuse her of her ideas. But how could she possibly believe that a duke could remain as innocent as she thinks me? Clearly the poor dear has no real experience, despite her protestation to the contrary. "Thank you, men, for your quick response to my summons," Alex began, addressing the 3 large men assembled in his study, dressed in the Wrentham livery. "I have a job for you." "All right, governor," declared the most vocal of the 3, happily. "Not to be rude about your hospitality in providing us with work, but being a footman is deadly dull." Alex grinned at the man's words. "This job might not be that much more interesting, I am afraid, Craig. I need the 3 of you to rotate shifts, watching Miss Rosamond Smythe." The 3 men looked at each other before turning blank looks on their master. Craig, always the spokesman, answered for the 3 of them. "Are we watching her to keep you informed of her activities, your grace?" he asked as politely as possible. Not that he really cared what the Duke was up to, but he needed to know the scope of their duties. "That is not exactly what I meant, although I would be glad if you could manage to keep me apprised of her whereabouts. I fear she might be in danger, and given the current situation between our families, I cannot warn her or her father of the danger. I need you 3 to watch over her as discreetly as possible, and keep your eye out for anyone else that might be watching her or her house." "Ah, I see. Righto, your grace. That should be right easy. If that will be all, we'll get right on it." The young men made to leave before one of them thought of something. "I'm assuming we'll all change out of our uniforms, right, your grace?" "That is an excellent idea, Thomas. Yes. Try to be as unobtrusive as possible. My livery being spotted near the Smythe residence would give rise to comments and conjecture, I'm quite certain. It would no doubt get you chased away as quick as a wing, too." Grinning, the three men exited the room, hurrying away to fulfill their duties. Alex could hear them grumbling as they went down the hall, arguing over who would be the first to take a turn at the task. He was happy to have such a reliable staff, and hoped it would be enough. He really needed to get a warning to Rose, but a note delivered by one of his footmen would be impossible, and even a hired urchin would be noticed by her parents. With fortuitous timing, Alex thought of Wesley just as he heard the knocker on his front door. Jumping to his feet, Alex hoped it was his friend coming to pay a visit. Not waiting for the butler to announce him, the Duke strode toward the front of the house. "My Lord Dunbar is here to see you, Your Grace," the butler announced redundantly as Alex entered the foyer. "Excellent, William, thank you," Alex answered cheerfully as he walked past both the butler and Lord Dunbar, expecting the Viscount to follow him as he entered the front receiving room. Glad to see Wesley close on his heels, Alex shut the door firmly behind him after instructing the butler. "See that we are not disturbed for at least a quarter of an hour." "Very well, Your Grace," the butler tried to answer, but the doors were already closed on him. "You look in fine spirits this morning, Your Grace. I was unsure if you would even be up and about at this hour of the day," Wesley declared to his good friend. "Whatever do you mean?" Alex was confused. "It is still a couple of hours before noon, Your Grace. Despite your early call upon me the other day, I know it is not your usual habit to be about so early," Wesley stated with a grin. "Is it really still that early?" Alex asked, surprised. "I would have thought it was halfway through the afternoon," he mused. "Well, never mind about that. What are you doing here if you thought I would not be about? Is it something urgent, or can it wait? Because I really have need of you." "That is why I am here. I awoke this morning remembering your concerns last night over Broderick, and I thought to offer my services this morning, such as they are. Keep in mind that I am a novice, but I am willing to do whatever is in my power to assist you and our fair country." "Those are truly noble sentiments, my good man, but right at the moment I need your assistance for the fair Rosamond." "Rosamond?" Wesley asked a trifle blankly. "We met this morning to discuss the situation, and I fear we were being watched. I failed to notice until she had already left, so I was unable to warn her, and of course I cannot call on her to deliver the news myself." "Nor can you send round a discreet note," finished the Viscount, catching the Duke's idea. "So you would like me to call upon her and apprise her of this development? Well, that shan't strain my skills overmuch. I would be happy to. How urgent is the delivery of this news? Should I set out immediately, or wait until the socially acceptable hour? And is there anything else you might need me to do?" Alex grinned at Dunbar's willing offer of help. "Thank you so much, Wes. I truly appreciate it. Part of me wants you to rush right over there, but it will draw the least amount of attention if you call at a more acceptable time, of course. And I'm fairly certain she should be safe for the time being. She was planning to return home and tell her father about Broderick's plots, or what little we know about them at the very least. She could be closeted with him for a while, and she is afraid she may be banished after that interview. So if she gets sent back home to their estate, she should be reasonably safe there." Wesley had a thought. "You say you were observed together. Do you think the person who was watching you heard your discussion?" "I think it highly unlikely, but it is possible. I was not paying very close attention to our surroundings, I am ashamed to admit, and did not notice him until after Rose had left, like I said. When I saw him, he was far enough away that it is doubtful he could hear our words, as we were speaking in low tones anyway. But under the circumstances, if he is one of Broderick's men, just the fact of us being together is damning, especially when coupled with her matchmaking efforts last night. Broderick will most certainly come to the conclusion that we are on to him. I have no way of knowing how that will affect him, but I must admit I am relieved that someone with knowledge, authority, and ability shall soon be involved in this convoluted affair." Wesley was nodding in sympathetic understanding. Alex continued on when it became obvious his friend had nothing further to ask or add. "I set my young groom to follow the one who was watching us. You may tell Rosie that, so she knows more information might be forthcoming. But I pray you do not tell her that I have set my men to watching her. I am unsure if she would be receptive to this idea. She has the ridiculous notion that she is capable of looking after herself. Seeing Wesley's face screwed up into an objection, Alex laughed and carried on. I do not mean to disparage her abilities, do not get me wrong here. She is an intelligent young woman, fully capable of all sorts of things that I probably cannot even fathom. But one cannot get around the fact that she is a girl, and as such, a man such as the likes of Broderick is quite capable of doing her a great deal of harm. And, if she is labouring under the delusion that he is unaware of her involvement, she will not be alert to any dangers. Even once she is made aware, I still cannot be easy about her safety. Even though it is she who brought me the information that has led to the situation, I cannot help but feel that it is my fault she may be in danger. He paused before adding as an afterthought, and possibly even banished. All understandable sentiments, but I must ask you an impertinent question, Your Grace. Wesley paused while Alex looked at him fully with his left eyebrow quirked in haughty inquiry. What are your intentions toward Miss Smythe? Given the state of affairs, as you called them, between your two families, I should think you would be delighted to see her in danger or banished. Why would I ever wish to see her in danger? Alex was shocked at his friend's suggestion. Even with the difficulties between the Smythes and the House of Wrentham, I would never wish to see any of our family in danger, least of all Rosie. Alex paused as he attempted to bring his temper under control, and thought more about Wesley's words. And I would dislike her to be banished as well. I am hoping to find some way to bridge the breach between our families, if you must know. Wesley grinned. That is excellent news, Your Grace. Seeing the warning look being shot his way by the Duke, he hastened to add, news that I will, of course, keep to myself. See that you do, Alex warned before beginning to pace. How soon do you think you could call on her? Wesley chuckled over the Duke's obvious concerned distraction. Did we not just agree that I cannot arrive before the fashionable hour? I thought to take her riding in the park. That way we can be assured of privacy for our discussion. I could, reasonably speaking, arrive a little early, even an hour or two, but that would still be a couple hours from now. It would actually be wise for me to do so, then the park will not be overcrowded, and we will be guaranteed privacy for our conversation. Yes, of course. I apologise, Dunbar. My wits have gone begging. Alex excused with a wry grin. It is just as well if she is to be closeted with her father for some time. No doubt her explanations will require more than a few minutes. I just fear that if she is unsuccessful in keeping mention of me out of her story, she may be in hot water with her parents. Understandable fears, Your Grace, Wesley acknowledged before reasoning. But even if they do send her packing back to the wilds of their estate, they would have to allow her a little bit of time for packing, and I would imagine they would not send her off when she is bound to end up driving in the dead of night, so she would have at least until tomorrow morning. Surely, not to place too fine a point upon my own importance, but I am a Viscount, they would allow me a few moments of her time, no matter how frustrated they might be with their errant daughter. Alex finally found reason for mirth, and he let out a loud guffaw over his friend's words. You are a complete hand, my lord. Thank you for that reminder. Lord and Lady Smythe might, in fact, view you in the form of a saviour, and they would be delighted to bundle her up into your carriage for a ride. That is, as long as they do not remember that we are such good friends. Wesley waved away the Duke's concern. I am known to be a highly sociable creature, one who has many varying friendships. They shall not dwell overmuch upon our connection, I am sure. Alex was not fully convinced, but they lacked any other plan, so there was naught he could do. He had plans to ride around to visit his solicitors once more and engage their assistance in finding out Broderick's schemes, now that it was determined they would not direct it at the Duke personally, but, in fact, the entire government. Alex bade a hasty goodbye to Lord Dunbar, and hurried about his own preparations. I shall wish you luck, then, Your Grace, Wesley said jauntily before making his way to the door. And you as well, came the heavier reply. Alex stood watching the door as the Viscount left, nearly as swiftly as he had arrived. Thanking the heavens for the comfortable friendship, the Duke pulled the bell for his butler as he strode from the room. See that my phaeton is brought round and ready in 15 minutes. I have to go out forthwith. Very good, your grace.